Martin North, John Adams, in the interest of the people. Hello, John. This is big news.
Yes, Martin. So we just had some big news over the weekend. The Liberal Party in Victoria had their state council meeting, and there was a motion put forward at that meeting calling on the Morrison government to withdraw the legislation for the cash ban. So that was some big news, and I've been talking to several people in the Victorian Liberal Party in the lead up to this meeting. And there was about 400 people at the meeting, and this represents the senior leadership of the party, and the party membership in Victoria is over 10,000 members, and the motion was successful. About 95% of the people in the room basically voted to say to Morrison, Frydenberg and Sukkar, withdraw the legislation. We don't want it. So today we have a special guest. We have the Steve Holland, who was the mover of the motion at the state council meeting. And Steve is a regular viewer of the show. He's against the cash ban, I think, both on philosophical and political and practical grounds. We have Steve to give his perspectives about the implications of the vote and how the vote went down and what do we do moving forward.
And it's worth saying that so far, at the time of this recording, this decision was not actually reported anywhere in the media.
Correct. Yeah. So the point to make is that there were media organisations inside the room at the state council meeting, including the Australian newspaper, because they were tweeting live about it. But there has been no reporting about this, and so one of the reasons why Steve decided to come and speak to us is because the mainstream media has basically gone silent on this issue. And another example of something significant, where 95% of the second largest division in the country of the Liberal Party says, forget about this, and the mainstream media says this is not a story. Well, I think this is a very big story.
Well, I think it's extremely significant. Steve, welcome to you. Thank you very much for spending some time with us. Can you introduce yourself first, and also can you explain your motivations for bringing that motion as you did?
Of course. Thank you, John and Martin. I guess I can say long-time listener, first-time caller, if that's what people say. So I've been a member of the Liberal Party for about a decade now. And so I should maybe say off the top, I'm only speaking on my own behalf. I don't represent the Liberal Party or anything like that. I'm just a run-of-the-mill member. I don't work for a member of Parliament, so I'm also not speaking on behalf of any of them. I think I first heard about the cash ban motion watching you and John. There was an article in The Australian, I think it was Grace Collier, who wrote about the draconian cash ban. I often follow her column, but I think that was quite recent. So I think I first heard about it on your show. So it was obviously quite a quiet introduction as far as the government's concerned. They certainly weren't making a song and dance about publishing the fact that they were intending to ban cash transactions. And so I spoke to a number of members of Parliament all around Australia, lower house and upper house, and I got a sense that, philosophically, they agreed with me. It just didn't fit with the Liberal Party's values. And so I decided I'd move this motion at our state council meeting because I just felt that members of the Liberal Party needed to know about the legislation. And also I just assumed, correctly in the end, I guess, that they wouldn't support the legislation either, and so they needed to know about it.
So I understand before the meeting took place, you did some wide canvassing, like I said, about in terms of the parliamentarians, but you also canvassed people in the membership as well. What was the sense you were getting, before the state council meeting? What was the sense that you were getting from the membership? And I'm assuming that you were getting a reasonably positive feeling, and that gave you confidence to bring the motion forward.
Yeah. So the first thing I'd probably say about that is that when I did raise it with people, a lot of people just didn't even know that it was on the agenda. And then it was kind of surprised. The reaction from them was surprised that it would even be proposed by a Liberal government to ban cash, because I don't think, again, only speaking for myself, I can't imagine any Liberal or even a member of Parliament, sitting in their office having some kind of a light bulb moment that they think they might just ban cash. So it probably raises the question about where this legislation came from, and that's what a lot of members, were surprised to hear about. And then I guess just from a philosophical perspective, they were opposed to it. A lot of them said, is there a limit? And I said, well, at first it was proposed that it would be $2,000 and now it's going to be $10,000. And some people kind of said, well, I don't use $10,000 cash anyway, but, I sort of can understand the slippery slope here. And then when you explain some of the consequences of the legislation, whether it's negative interest rates or what's happening with the RBA around quantitative easing, or a lot of members are quite familiar with what happens overseas with the IMF and what happened in Cyprus with bank bail-ins and things like that. A lot of members were really concerned about it. So once you even if you do get a little bit of opposition, I found that once you kind of talk it through, most people were generally opposed to the legislation. Did
the main arguments of the government come up in conversation around the black economy, tax evasion in terms of illicit illegal activity? Did you get pushback to say that this is that's the motivation of the government, and these other issues that Martin and I have been raising around negative interest rates and the war and the international war on cash? Basically, Treasury and others have said that this is, quote, out of scope. So did you get any pushback on the issues you just talked about? And did people say, no, it's not about that, it's actually about it's actually about tax, and it's actually about the black economy?
Yeah, there was absolutely no pushback on that. And so that's obviously the line that is being used. It's about the black economy, cracking down on tax evasion and things like that. But, nobody was talking about those lines apart from maybe the members of parliament when the legislation was being moved. So, and, when I sort of pushed about those issues, I guess it was maybe good timing that the motion came up right around the Westpac headlines over the last week, that a lot of people don't see cash as a major issue when it comes to the black economy and fraud and money laundering and things like that.
Absolutely.
So the State Council was the body that you were presenting to and brought the motion to. So can we explore a little bit about that and, who was in attendance and what
course.
Representative footprint does it have?
Yeah, so every division of the Liberal Party will work differently. So the Victorian division will do things differently to the New South Wales division and the WA division and so on and so forth. In Victoria, we have what's called State Council, which is basically a 2-day conference. We hold it over the weekend. We do it twice a year. In the first half of the year, we do a metropolitan one in Metro Melbourne. And then in the later half of the year, we do a regional one. So we pick a regional centre around Victoria and we hold it there. So the main one in the first half of the year probably gets the highest attendance, and there's a lower attendance for the regional one. You get a sort of a more regional kind of member. Basically, I think as John said, there's north of 10,000 members of the Liberal Party in Victoria, is my understanding. And those members all over Victoria, they elect delegates to attend. So I think there's probably between 1,200 and 1,300 delegates that are eligible to attend State Council. And you'll get the highest turnout. You'll probably get over 1,000 at the State Council the first half of the year. And at this one, I'd say probably there was about 500 or 600. And so those delegates are really representative of the membership because they get elected from each region, gets its own set of delegates, and they get elected to attend State Council as voting members. So that's basically the makeup of State Council, and all sorts of things happen. There's, voting for various positions and things like that. The media are in attendance for a big chunk of the first day and also the second day when we have basically a keynote speech on the first day from the feds and then a keynote speech on the second day from the state guys. So the media are present for a lot of that. So, what I'm telling you around my motion is not, Liberal Party state secrets. They are in attendance and they did see the motion go through. So one of the things we get to do in terms of what we get to put on the agenda is policy motions. So there was a whole raft on there and one of them was mine. It's actually in 10 years as a member, the first time I put up a policy motion myself, I felt that this was just, the cash ban was just a step too far.
And what was the motion that you then proposed?
Yeah, I have the exact wording here. So the motions need to be quite short in terms of how long they are, and you can include a 100-word explanatory statement as well on the agenda. So the motion was that this State Council calls on the federal government to reaffirm its commitment to individual freedom and free enterprise by withdrawing the currency restrictions on the use of Cash Bill 2019. And just in the explanatory notes, I included a bit of details about the bill, cash transactions, $10,000 threshold, and, some of the reasons why Liberal Party members might be opposed to that and some of the consequences.
Right. Well, that was pretty strong and straightforward, and you've got a 95% support rate. So what's the implications of that?
Yeah, so 95%, there was probably at the time in the main forum, there was, I'd say, around 300 to 400 people in the main forum, more people out because there's various things going on. The motion itself is not binding. So I know the Labor Party in Victoria, for example, have binding motions on their members of parliament. Our motions are not binding on the members of parliament, so if they want to, they can choose to ignore it. But I'd say the key thing, particularly in Victoria, other states are different. In the Victorian division of the Liberal Party, grassroots members, so any member that has been a member for 2 years, can essentially vote to choose their member of parliament. So we have what's called grassroots pre-selections. So when you've got an overwhelming amount of support for a policy motion like this, it's a pretty compelling case for the members of parliament to basically do what the members would like them to do.
Okay. And so was the Treasurer or the Assistant Treasurer involved or there?
So they were definitely both there, is my understanding, and I obviously saw the Treasurer speak probably about 15 minutes before my motion came up, I think. He gave his keynote address. It's not unusual for them to not be in the room, though, and that's up to them. There's a lot of other things going on. So I don't think Michael Sukkar was in the room, and I saw the Treasurer leave the room before my motion got up. But my understanding is there were other members of the federal parliament in the room at the time.
Okay, so what do you think this means then in terms of the Liberal Party and how it regards its members?
So the debate was quite interesting because the way the debate works is I get a very short period of time to move my motion. It's about 3 minutes, and then there's a seconder that seconds the motion, and they get 2 minutes, and then there's back and forward debate. We have 2 minutes each for speakers for and against the motion until we reach the time limit of about 20 minutes. So there were a lot of speakers for the motion, and it was clear to me that and probably surprised me a little bit that people were very much across this issue. There was a couple of people that had even, read the legislation and described to the forum, exactly how bad it was and what the implications were. I think the mood of the room was very strong, that, this was not Liberal Party policy. It was antithetical to our values and founding principles. And I think that there will be a very strong case for members of the Liberal Party to reach out to their members of parliament and say that they basically need to withdraw the legislation. And so that's what I'm pushing for, and I know a lot of other people are pushing for that as well.
Okay, Steve. Now, so a lot of the audience know that I used to be in the Liberal Party. I'm no longer in the Liberal Party, and I used to be an advisor to Arthur Sinodinos. So, I've seen these things happen over the last 15, 20 years myself. So, So you're attempting to have the government withdraw this legislation. What are the prospects of that to occur, particularly because the motion that was passed is non-binding and because it only passed one division, and obviously you've got other divisions within Australia of the Liberal Party?
Yeah, so we're in quite an interesting position because obviously the Treasurer is a Victorian and the Assistant Treasurer, Michael Sukkar, is a Victorian. And as I explained earlier, they will both at some point seek re-endorsement from their local membership. And so when you have a motion passed such as this with such overwhelming support, it makes a pretty compelling case that they probably need to respond to this. I'm quite optimistic that the legislation will be withdrawn. I've already spoken to a number of members of parliament around Australia, not just Victorians, and I hope they see this as a real message that the Liberal Party members don't support it. And I think most of them understand that. They understand that party members have a voice. And I think when it's as overwhelming as this, that is as good a case as any.
Yeah, so it sounds as though, this is a fundamental question about values as well as the specifics relating to the bill.
Yeah, that's right. The way I kind of put it is that I'm a Liberal first in the classical Liberal sense, and then I'm a Liberal Party member second. And there are a lot of members that hold my views. And when we pre-select members of Parliament to represent the Liberal Party, we expect them to stay true to their values. And that was one of the surprising things when I first heard about the legislation was I thought, I can't believe it's a Liberal government because, you can log on to the Liberal Party website and you can read the values there, individual liberty, free enterprise, you can't possibly see where this legislation would fit in. So there is a very strong philosophical and values-based case to be made in opposition to the bill.
So finally, Steve, for those Australians outside the Liberal Party who perhaps also oppose the policy, what's your advice to them and what they might do with regards to continuing the opposition to the bill?
Well, there's a bit of a saying, I don't know where it comes from, but decisions are made by those who show up. So I've been a member of the Liberal Party for 10 years. If there is anybody listening that is Liberal inclined, I'd recommend that they join their respective political party in their country or even in Australia. Or if you're not Liberal inclined, then join your Labor Party or Socialist Party, though I suspect they might be in favour of banning cash, and get involved, because ultimately when you've got political parties in a democracy, they are going to be, the members of parliament are going to be representative of the party membership before they're going to be representative of Australians, which, you can argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is a strong case, a strong argument for why you need to get involved in political parties. And membership is kind of on the slide, and it has been for a very long time for all the major parties. And I think if more people got involved, whether it's in Australia or elsewhere, then you'd find that the legislation that is going through the Parliament is much more representative of what members want, and we need people with good, strong values to be involved in that process.
Steve, well, thank you for that and for your time spent with us today. I think this is a really important conversation, and it certainly does underscore the issues that the government potentially has with this bill. And as you say, it's about getting involved, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thank you, John, and thank you, Martin, and keep up the good work.
So, John, what's your reaction? I mean, this seems to me to be a very, very significant event.
Yes, so I think there's a few points to make, Martin. So I think it is quite significant that the membership of the Victorian Liberal Party basically said thanks but no thanks, and hopefully for those people in the Liberal Party across the country outside Victoria, they'll take sort of heart and they'll actually start to mobilise in their own jurisdictions, because the philosophy that was expressed on the weekend by the Victorians. I mean these are values that should be held by Liberal members across the country. And truth be told, one of the reasons why I quit the Liberal Party is because I have had a feeling several years ago that they no longer believed in these values. So it was good to see that the membership believe in freedom. Now let's obviously see what comes of the Parliament. To be honest, I think Steve is a little bit optimistic in thinking that the government will withdraw the legislation. I think it'd be highly embarrassing for Frydenberg and Sukkar. They have pushed this right through the House of Representatives, right through the Senate. If they were to, say, okay, we're going to withdraw this because our own members are saying, forget it, that would be quite embarrassing. And I think people some of the journalists would actually call the government out for being inconsistent. If you're going to commit to a course of action, you should continue through it. And probably the other point that Steve didn't touch on that I think is significant is when you look at political parties in the modern era, and I've seen this sort of having worked in a senatorial office, is there's a distinction between your values and your membership and the people who fund the party. And so there are a huge set of vested interests who basically dictate the agenda to the political parties, both through money, also through influence, as well as through the media. So even though that the grassroots are saying no, there is enormous institutional pressure to get this done, particularly because, again, I think this is all about negative interest rates. Tomorrow we're seeing the governor of the RBA giving a speech in Sydney about unconventional monetary policy, and it's likely that he'll be announcing the commencement of QE in 2020. Negative interest rates, we'll have to see when that will come, but I think negative interest rates will come, given that even Westpac is saying that we're seeing a further cut in the official cash rate from 0.75% to 0.5% early next year. So we're on the path to these negative interest rates. We're on the path of cash being the enemy of monetary policy. And so there's enormous institutional pressure for Frydenberg to push this through. And my concern, I guess, is those pressures will, perhaps win the day. even though the membership is saying that this policy is completely the policy is against our values. So we'll obviously have to see how it plays, but obviously I think it was a positive development that Australians, who are part of the government, who basically saying, we don't want this, and we'll obviously have to keep the pressure on, given that the Senate inquiry is still underway.
Sure, and the point is democracy is about the voice of the people, right? And the voice of the people says we don't like it, so that should count for something, shouldn't it?
Yes, I agree. So it should count for something. I would probably say in recent political history in Australia, it hasn't counted for much, but we'll see if we can change political history in the next few months.
We'll look forward to it, John, see what happens. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Martin North, John Adams, in the interest of the people. We'll see you next time.